So welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Earl, and today I'm going to be speaking with you about eliminating drama with homeowners and reducing conflict in your construction projects. So let me start with a question. For the builders out there, do you remember when you first became interested in construction? Any of you? Maybe it was love at first sight. It was for me. I'm lucky enough to have a picture of that day. This is my first construction project. So I was 9 years old, and my parents decided to do a 500 square foot addition to their home. So even though this is one of the smallest projects that I've ever worked on, it's this 500 square foot remodel that excited me in a way that only your first project can. You know, I remember back then, construction seemed like magic to me. You know, I'd come home so excited every day from school, wanting to see what they'd built that day. It was just magical how it would appear. And I'd walk through the job site, picking up discarded nails and those little round punch outs from the old metal J boxes, you know, like they were coins from a pirate's treasure. So that was how I got involved. Now, why did you get into construction? Think about it. Some of you may be like me, you got exposed early on. Maybe your dad was a builder or another family member and you learned the trades growing up. Or maybe it was even just cleaning up at the job site. But what you probably didn't realize was how much of your time you would spend dealing with homeowners, right? I mean, did you ever think that you'd have to be a therapist, a marriage counselor, and possibly even a psychologist, right? You know, I got into construction because I love building things, but I didn't want to be Dr. Phil, right? So now part of what I love about construction is solving problems, but not solving problems related to homeowners, solving problems related to building, right? You know, how to put certain things together, sequencing the subs in a certain way to accomplish a specific task. So sometimes I get my best ideas when I'm not even on the job site, like in the shower. Okay, so if any of you were wondering, that's not me, because his hair is a little not white enough, right? And I'm more of a loofah guy, but other than that, my wife thinks that's me. So now, this is where I hate to do my problem solving, right? So while problem solving for me in the shower can be fun and productive, problem solving in bed is far from fun and rarely productive, right? So my goal is to never think about a homeowner when I'm lying in bed. Let me put that a different way. My goal is to never have a problem with a homeowner get to the point where it's keeping me up at night. And I'm happy to say that for the most part, that rarely happens today. Now, I didn't expect construction to be problem-free, right? No profession is. But I didn't realize that problems with homeowners would be the most difficult to solve. You know, building problems, they're easy, right? A 2x4 never gives you a hard time. And, you know, sheetrock, it doesn't complain that you're behind schedule. And when was the last time your laser level was in tears because a sub left dirty footprints on your white carpeting of your client's house, right? So, but unfortunately, the problems with homeowners are the ones that can have the longest impact on our business. For those of you that have been in construction more than 10 years like me, you probably didn't realize that when you started off, right, that one little mistake with a homeowner could have such a big impact due to this, right? One little mistake with a homeowner can have more impact than all of this brilliant problem solving that you do on the job. So some people call this the curse of social media. But with a proactive social media campaign, it can actually become a great source of new business. Today, I want to give you some new perspectives and insights on how to deal with homeowners and all of the drama that goes along with it. So my goal is to help you improve your relationships with your homeowners. By the end of this presentation, I hope you'll have more confidence in dealing with your clients. And also you'll have learned specific techniques for reducing conflict in your construction projects. So let me start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I've been in construction for about 30 years. For the last 20 years, I've been an owner's rep. I don't know if any of you know what an owner's rep is. So I'm a professional consultant that's hired by homeowners and that are either building custom homes or doing high-end remodels. And I serve to communicate, coordinate, and integrate between all of the people that are involved in the project, right? The builder, their architect, interior designer, all of the people that are working with the homeowners. Now, I'm also a business coach, and I work exclusively with residential contractors. And I work with a team of coaches, including Paul Sanneman, David Loopberger, Joe Stoddard. David's here today. I just saw his presentation earlier today. Joe was at a presentation earlier. So between us, we've worked with contractors for like 25 years, hundreds of them in every major market in the US. And we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And most of the ugly is in dealing with homeowners and their drama. So I'm going to share with you today some of the lessons that we've learned from all of this experience. Now, I'm also a public speaker, and I travel around giving presentations to construction organizations about these lessons that I've learned. Also, for the last 20 years, I've practiced under a Zen master named Thich Nhat Hanh. And I was actually an owner's rep for the construction of a nunnery at a Buddhist monastery in Escondido in San Diego, California. So, and the monks there nicknamed me the Zen Builder. So I'm going to share with you today a little Zen wisdom. Now, we're not going to be burning any incense or doing any chanting or anything like that, don't worry. I just want to give you some ideas of how to bring a little more Zen to your customer relationship and how to bring a little more peace and ease to your construction business. Okay, so the first thing I want to discuss today is helping you to understand the homeowner's perspective. See, homeowners have a very different perspective than most of us as construction professionals. And oftentimes, even if we know that, we don't recognize what an impact it has on our homeowners. So the first thing to realize is, and this is probably no news to you, that homeowners, right, most of them have very little experience with construction. I deal with a lot of really successful and smart people, and those are the people that know the least about construction. My first example of this was when I was a student MBA student at Stanford. And my roommate, this guy, his name was Mike, super smart guy, right? Didn't know anything about how a house worked. So one night I went in his room and he was studying by a flashlight. His desk lamp was out. And I said, Mike, what's wrong? Why don't you have your desk lamp on? He said, oh, the light bulb burned out and we don't have any more bulbs. And I'm like, we've got more bulbs. He said, no, we don't. So I went and looked, sure enough, we had a bulb. So I went and got a 75-watt light bulb and brought it to him. And Mike goes, well, this is a 100-watt desk lamp, so it won't fit. And I'm like, wow. So later that year, we had a power outage. And so we lit a couple candles and we were studying in the front room. And he started squirming. And I said, you know, Mike, what's wrong? And he said, well, gosh, I hope the electricity comes on soon because I really got to go to the bathroom. And so I hope the electricity comes back on because I got to flush the toilet. And now this was 1986, right? This isn't like today with the Toto washlets and like the toilets that actually need to be plugged in. So now Mike, really smart guy, went on to Wall Street, you know, did amazing things on Wall Street, but he did continue to demonstrate his complete lack of knowledge about housing because he was involved in the subprime mortgage crisis last decade, right? So what happened to us all in 2008, you can thank my roommate, Mike, for that. Okay, so the next thing that it's important for you to understand about homeowners is they don't get that a home construction project is a process, right? It's not a product. And we all know that, but see, homeowners don't. Or if they do, they don't focus on it. And I can tell you that most of the drama that happens with homeowners is related to this, to the process, not the product. Okay, so another important thing to realize is that, you know, a home construction project, the purchasing decisions for a home construction project, very different than what most homeowners are used to buying today. You know, this online shopping thing has really gotten people thinking in a very different way. So, you know, you can't obviously go on to Amazon and buy your new kitchen and have it shipped to you or your new home. But homeowners, sometimes they forget about that. And so, like, for example, with the pricing, they don't understand variable pricing in construction, right? So they're so used to being able to sit down at their computer, they get on Google, they type in their product, they get prices from 5 different stores. They know exactly what they should pay for that, right? So what happens in construction? They go out and ask 3 contractors, and they get 3 different prices. They can't figure that out. How does that work? So another thing is that it's a lengthy process, right? They're so used to being able to get onto Amazon, buy anything they want, get it there the next day, right? Before you want it, like Amazon says. Obviously, that doesn't happen with construction. So it's really hard for them to have to wait months, possibly even years, to get their construction project done. And the third thing, this is a big one, is the uncertainty of the product. You know, you can get onto Amazon, you can get reviews, you can find 5 other people that bought the same product and how it worked or didn't work. You can't do that in a construction project. Now, as a good contractor, you try to reduce that uncertainty, right? You make sure that your design team has got the details put together. You get the clients to find those finishes early on. But the problem is you can't eliminate all the uncertainty, right? And the problem with that is that the homeowner is going to change their mind. You know they are, right? They've never done this before. So that's a big issue for them. Now again, as contractors, we take this for granted, right? We know it's a long process. We know the price is going to be variable. We know that it's going to be uncertain what they're going to get until it's done. But see, the homeowner doesn't know that. Or if they do, they don't really think about it. So it's important for you to educate your homeowner and tell them about this, educate them about this process. See, homeowners don't know what they don't know. And if we don't tell them, we all end up suffering as a result. Okay, so the next thing that it's important for a homeowner to understand is that their home construction project is a prototype. It really is. And they don't want to hear that. You know, in today's world of constantly updated software and annual product improvements, a homeowner is not used to buying a prototype. But a home construction project, it's not like a car, right? Ford puts out hundreds of prototypes before they put a new car model out on the road. And it's not that way. You know, you have one chance to get it right in a construction project, one chance. And you can't issue a software update 3 months after they move in to fix all the problems. Also, it's important for the homeowner to understand that no one's ever built this exact project before, and no one will ever build it again. You got one chance. And you know, I don't care if you're a kitchen remodeler and you've done 200 kitchens. You've never done this exact one for this exact client. And once a homeowner understands this, once they see that their product really is a prototype, they're much more understanding of the uncertainties related to it. And they're much more forgiving of the mistakes that will be made, because that's what happens when you're building a prototype. Okay, so the next thing to understand too is we're having these very intimate interactions inside the most private spaces of their homes, especially for you remodelers out there, right? So what are the 2 most common areas that we remodel? It's the name of the show here, kitchens and baths, right? So these are the 2 most intimate spaces. If you think about it, that's kind of where all the stuff happens in homes, right? And like bathrooms, I know when I go through a walkthrough in someone's master bathroom, I can tell a lot about their personal lives, right? Sometimes a little bit too much. Like I'll walk in and I'll say like, you knew we were coming, right? This was a construction walkthrough. Like, you couldn't clear that stuff off the counter? You think we want to know what happened last night? And like what's over there on the floor? You know, we didn't need to see that. So, and kitchens, you know, kitchens are the heart of the home. That's where everything happens. And we forget about that sometimes. You know, as a construction crew, we just think we're going to work. This is what our crew sees, right? But this is what really goes on within a kitchen. It's not just where they fix their meals, right? It's where the kids come to do their homework, the family comes to hang out. And if we do a kitchen remodel, we disrupt that entire routine. Now, one of the first recommendations that I make to my homeowners is if they're doing a kitchen remodel is move out. But you know, sometimes people can't do that. And if they can't, it's important for you to understand that and communicate that to them. So now some people tell me, well, look, if I tell my homeowner all this, they're never going to hire me, right? But the point is that you have to develop a level of trust with them. And sometimes you have to be willing to tell them things that they really don't want to hear. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the importance of trust and how we do that. Okay, so in all of my years of dealing with residential contractors, 20 years, I've determined that emotions are the biggest challenge in residential construction. So this is really important, and I go through this with all of my clients. I coach them on this, what we call the emotional roller coaster that they're going to go through, right? The highs and lows that they're going to experience during their construction project. So this is such a big deal that my colleague, David Lupberger, who's here, has written an entire book on it, right? It's called Managing the Emotional Homeowner. And it's all about dealing with the emotions that a homeowner goes through in a construction project. So this is the emotional roller coaster that David has put together. And I love this. I use it all the time with either my homeowner clients. I have one of my contractor coaching clients here. He has it in his marketing materials. It's a great way for you to be able to explain to your clients what's going on. It manages their expectations, and that's so very important. So today, actually, my client and David and I, we were having lunch together, and David brought up a great point, which is, you can't just give this to your clients at the beginning of the job. You have to refresh it. I think David said like every 2 or 3 weeks, you bring out this chart and you say, hey, here's where we are. So I have a perfect example of this. I'm working with a client right now. We're doing a custom home in San Diego. And the design review committee is out of control. It took us almost 2 years to get through design review and get through plans. So you can imagine where this guy was. He was like lower than lower on this thing. But a couple months ago, we started framing. So now he's like over the moon, right? Because he's like, wow, all this stuff is happening now. And he thinks it's great because literally every day he shows up and there's another room that's built. And he's like, God, this is great. I mean, we're going to be done with this thing in a couple of months. So I pulled this chart out. And I said, hey, Brian, I just want to warn you, but this is where we are, right? So you're thinking it's great because we're framing everything up. But the next thing that we do here, it's called rough-in, right? And so we're going to be pulling in all the pipes and the wires and everything that goes on. And for weeks, it's going to look like nothing is happening. And you're going to get really frustrated. And we're going to end up all the way down here. So just warning you. Now, at that point, we're going to start hanging sheetrock. So things will start looking up at that point, right? Because every day you'll come and you'll actually start to get a sense and a feel for the room. But after we hang all the drywall, then we start this thing called taping and texturing and sanding. And once again, weeks are going to go by and it's going to look like nothing's happening. And the place is going to be a mess because there's drywall dust all over the place. So we're going to end up all the way down here. This is going to be your lowest point. But then at that point, things are going to look up, right? Because then we start the fun part. Then we start the finishes. And we start to install cabinets and tile and painting. And pretty soon, before you know it, you're going to want to throw a party. But I got to warn you, at that point, we're still far from done, right? We still have finishes to do. We got all your punch list items. I mean, look at the chart. You've still got a couple more months left to finish this thing. So I'm just warning you, that's the way it works. Well, I experienced my own example of the emotional homeowner roller coaster this summer when I decided to take on my own remodel. So it started when my wife said, Ed, we've lived in this house now, like 12, 13 years. Carpeting's really looking old. We should replace the carpeting. And I said, okay, you know what? You're right, Sue. But you know what? I'm in construction, and I know if we're going to replace the carpeting, let's paint first, right? We should paint first. And my wife said, well, I'm the wife of someone who's in construction, and so I know that if we're going to paint first, we really should do all that drywall. Let's hang those light fixtures that we want to do, and cabinets and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, you're right, let's do it. And she said, and if we're going to replace the carpeting, what good interior designer wouldn't replace the flooring and the tile in the bathroom, right? Okay, Sue, let's do that. And then she goes, well, but if we're going to do the tile in the bathroom, then we got to, right? You know where this is going, right? So, I don't know, $60,000, and 6 months later, we were done replacing the carpeting in the house. So it was so challenging dealing with all of the emotions in the house, All of these issues just kept coming up with my wife and my kids. So the worst was when the contractor, and I know I should have known better, but he wanted to save some time. I'm trying to get this thing done, right? This was supposed to be just carpet. So he decides he's going to sand the bedroom doors in place instead of take them outside. But he didn't put up any plastic. So my wife shows up later that day, right? And it's like Christmas in July. There is like a white powder over the entire flat surface, everything throughout the whole house. So I show up like, 5 minutes later, and she just lets me have it, right? I thought you were a construction project manager. How could you let this happen? And then my son shows up a few minutes later, and he looks at me and he's like, well, how's that working out for you, Mr. Zen Builder? So it was, again, so challenging. It was my wife, it was the kids, it was our cat. I mean, at one point, Winston the cat was so upset. We came home and he expressed his displeasure right there on the floor. We could tell he was not happy with the construction project either. So then for the next week, like every day we'd come home and Winston would express his displeasure in a different place in the house, right? So it was good that we hadn't replaced the carpeting yet. So by that point, my wife, she'd had it. She said, this has got to go. So she goes to the pet store, and she finds this. Calm Down Medicine by Whisker City. Calms nervous and stressed cats. So then I get online, and I find this. Anti-anxiety cat music. So we tried them both out, and you know what? It worked. Winston calmed down, and he was fine. So actually, this calm down stuff, it works so good, I bought a case of it. And now, in my new homeowner, when I meet with them for the first time, I give them a bottle. And I say, look, if you got pets, you should try it. And if you don't, you might want to take a few shots yourself. You never know, it could help out. All right. So in addition to dealing with the emotions of homeowners, we also have the challenges of dealing with difficult clients, right? So in my 20 years of dealing with clients, I have figured out that I can pretty much tell if a client is going to be difficult by asking one question. What do you do? Right? So I have figured out in my 20 plus years that I can pretty much tell if a client is going to be difficult based on their professions. So I've put together my list of the top 4, and I'm going to go over them with you here today. So number 1, if any of you were in the Bambi versus Godzilla this morning, I threw this one out here. For difficult people, he was asking about who are difficult people, personality types. And so I said engineers. Engineers are number 1 on my list. I'm sorry, are there any engineers here? All right, so why are these guys difficult? Okay, well, they're difficult because you engineers, you're used to being in control, right? You guys are experts. You know what you're doing. Remember what I said earlier about the uncertainty of a home construction project? See, that doesn't work with engineers. Even like this guy, he's designing a bridge, right? He doesn't realize the emotional component of a residential construction project. This guy is not worried about the color of the carpeting on the bridge, right? So last year, right before I came to this show, I was in a restaurant and I was putting together this material. And this guy walked by me. And I just knew he was an engineer. I've done this so long, I can kind of spot him like a mile away, right? You can just see engineers. So now it helped that he was wearing this shirt. Right? So he walks by me, I see this, I'm like, this is perfect. This is unbelievable. So I had to stop and say, hey, can I take a picture of your shirt? And he's like, yeah, but don't get a picture of my face, just take my shirt. So I told him about this presentation. I told him what I thought about engineers. He completely agreed. He said, yeah, you know what? He said, it's just the way we think. It's the way we approach everything. We drive people crazy. And his wife's there going, yeah, like he drives me crazy. And he's like, I'm retired, but it doesn't matter. Engineering for me, it's a way of life. It's how I approach everything. So another important thing to realize about engineers is that think about what they do for a living. They re-engineer and they re-engineer. So what do they do in a home construction project? They make changes all the time. That's what engineers do. Okay, so number 2 is, anyone want to guess? Doctors. Doctors are number 2, at least for me. So why doctors? Well, they're very similar to engineers, right? They're also used to being experts in their field, being in control, kind of being the smartest guy in the room, knowing everything that there is to know about their profession and what they're dealing with. So I had this one client. The other thing is that they also don't understand, again, these uncertainties of the homeowner construction process that I talked about. So I had this one guy, he was a surgeon from Phoenix, and a hard to pronounce name, but we called him Dr. A. So we were doing a remodel for him, and when we went to go demo one of the walls, there was a gas line running through one of the walls that we were going to demo, which we didn't know about in advance. He just couldn't understand that. He was like, I don't get it, Ed. Like, how could you not know there was a gas line running through that wall? And I didn't know how to explain it to him. And then I finally thought, and I said, you know, Dr. A, you can look at like 100 people's forearms, right? And their radius and their ulna are in the exact same place. But it's not that way with a home, right? You look at 100 walls in 100 homes and the gas lines are in different places. I mean, unless it's a tract home, right? So then he kind of got that and it made more sense to him. Okay, so number 3 is attorneys, right? Many of you probably had them at the top of your list, right? So I don't have to talk too much about attorneys, but a couple of things. So attorneys, you know, if you think about an attorney, they're paid not to trust people. That's what they do. So we're in an industry where people don't trust us. And so that can be really difficult for attorneys to deal with that, right? I'm going to talk more about trust. It's so important. So the best story that I heard about an attorney, I was giving a presentation at a NARI group in Minneapolis. And this one builder there, he had his attorney draft his construction contract. And then like, I don't know, a couple years, 2 or 3 years later, his attorney contacted him and wanted to do a job with him, wanted to become a client. And so he gives him the contract that he wrote, and he wouldn't sign his own contract. Okay, so number 4 is not so much a profession as it is a lack of a profession. That is a retired person. Retired people, right? We've all had those people, right? They got plenty of time on their hands. They dig into all the details. They ask you 101 questions. They're at the job site more than you are. Okay, so the only thing worse than a retired person is a retired doctor or a retired engineer. Then you got real trouble. I had a job last year and I had a retired attorney. She was a retired attorney and he was a retired engineer. It was very tough, very tough. Okay, so this is my list. This is my list of most difficult clients. So how do we deal with these people? Well, you know, if you know their tendencies in advance, then you can learn how to deal with them. For example, if you have an engineer, talk to them about change orders, right? Make sure you have good language in your contract about change orders because you know there's changes coming. If you have a doctor, talk to them about the uncertainties of construction, about how every home is built differently. You know, err on the side of giving them more information rather than less. And if you have an attorney, document everything, right? Make sure everything's in writing. Okay, so some of you may say, well, you know what, Ed, I have a better idea. So this is what I'm going to do. When someone calls me and they want me to give them a bid, I'm just going to say, well, what do you do? And then if they tell me they're an engineer or an attorney, I'm going to say, you know what, I'd really like to help you, but we're backlogged to like 2025. I'm sorry, you know? So I think that's a mistake because what I have found is that oftentimes if you have a difficult client and you know how to deal with them, let's face it, these people are difficult in lots of different ways, right? So if you know in advance how to deal with them and you know how to deal with their tendencies, then difficult clients can be a great source of referrals. For me, Dr. A, he was a pain in the A, right? But at the end, because I was able to deal with him, he became one of my best referrals. He's brought me so much more business. And so again, don't shy away from the difficult client. So last thing about that before I go into couples is also, you know, the strategies that I just presented, you know, they work not only just for difficult clients, right? The fact of documenting things, communicating with them, making sure you have good change orders, those work with all clients. Okay, so now let's move on to working with couples, right? So they're another challenging group that we deal with. And probably for most of us, the large majority of our clients are couples. So we have to know how to deal with couples. So one of the first things that I do when I'm working with a couple is I'll ask them this question. I'll say, do you know what the most expensive part of a construction project is? And if it's a remodel, they'll say something like, well, you know, we heard it's the cabinets, right? You know, the cabinets sometimes they can be super expensive. Our neighbors, they way overspend on cabinets. Or the husband will say, well, it's the flooring because, you know, there's so many square feet of flooring. And I say, no. The most expensive part of a construction project is the divorce. So this kind of gets their attention, right? And obviously I'm joking, but I'm also partly truthful, and I'll tell them, I'll say, look, studies have shown that one of the most stressful processes, one of the most stressful events that a marriage goes through is a home construction project. It's right up there with an affair or a loss of a job or problems with the kids. And this gets their attention. And I tell them, I say, look, we're going to avoid this most expensive cost by all means. And as contractors, you really can help to do that, right? You can help to make sure that the husband and the wife are on the same page. So let me go over a few things of how I work with couples. So the first thing is I give them an introductory survey. And so I'll ask them what their preferences are. So one of the first things I ask is what's their preferred contact method, right? So you got to be able to get a hold of your clients. Most of us, we figure this out as we go along, but it's kind of good to ask them at the beginning so you don't have to guess. Like, for example, take my wife, please. So she, if I was to pick up my phone right now and call her, I can almost guarantee you, even though she knows I'm here, we're in San Diego, I'm half, over here, maybe I've got an issue, I forgot something, I can almost guarantee you she will not answer her phone right now. And if I leave her a voicemail, when I get back on Sunday, I can almost guarantee you she will not have listened to that voice message. But if I got out my phone right now and I texted her, I did this earlier today, within like 2 minutes, I'll get a reply, right? Because she runs her life on text messages. She's texting our sons about practice time and, other moms about the carpool. So I find it's a great way to deal with moms and how to communicate with them. Now, if your client's a busy business professional, they're not going to want to get a bunch of text messages on the phone, right? They're going to want to get emails or possibly a voicemail. And also you got to know who you're dealing with. Like, take my dad, for example, right? If I was to send him a text message, I would never get a reply because he doesn't text. He doesn't even have a keyboard on his old flip phone. So again, we figure this out throughout the project, but why not ask at the beginning so that you don't have to figure things out? I had a CEO actually one time who told me in his preferred method that he wanted text messages. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, like a CEO wants text messages. So I sent him an email. And about 3 hours later, I get a text message as a response. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So then I texted him again, and he responded right away. So I don't know, like he's sitting in the boardroom, like texting me back and forth. But whatever it was, he would not respond to emails. It was all text messages for this guy. Okay, so the next thing to understand with communication is it's not just about what you say, but it's how you say it and which medium you use to say it. See, in today's world, there's so many different ways that we can communicate, right? Which is a blessing and a curse. So it's important for us to understand the various methods of communication. So I'm going to talk about 5 methods of communication. I think that an effective contractor really has to be able to communicate with all 5 of these methods. So the first is text messages. We've talked about that. That's super common, right? Second is voicemails. That's also very common, right? If people don't want a text message, they'll leave a voicemail. Thing with a voicemail, you got to remember, it's a one-way communication, right? It's great for leaving an update, but you can't get a decision made on a voicemail. So third is phone conversations, which in today's world is getting much more challenging, right? Most people, they want you to text them, leave them a voicemail, or that's it. But you know what? In construction, communication is key. You can't underestimate the importance of conversations, right? You got to get your clients on the phone with a conversation, or the best, the gold standard really, a face-to-face conversation. So the fourth is emails. Now, I love emails. They've transformed the way I manage projects from like 10 years ago. I can be so much more efficient in managing projects with emails now. And then last, written documents, right? We're in construction, complex things going on. Don't think that you can get by without written documents. Now, even though you need written documents, it doesn't mean you need a bunch of paper in your office, all right? I have gotten to the point where I'm pretty close to being a paperless office. And I'll tell you how I do that in a little bit. Okay, so I've organized these in a specific order, from fastest to slowest, right? Text messages, super fast. Written documents, they can take hours, maybe days to put together. But realize that they're in reverse order for the amount of detail that you can communicate, right? So while text message is super fast, but that's the least amount of detail that you can communicate with. So by knowing that, you can kind of know the appropriate method of what you want to do and how you want to communicate based on that. So let me again just emphasize the importance of written documents, right? you have to have things in writing. I tell my contractor coaching clients, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. It's got to be in writing. Now, millennials, I don't know if any of you are out there, so you think you just want to use those top two, right? They just want to use voicemails, text messages. You can't. You got it. Those are great, but you got to use the other three as well. You got to know when and how to communicate. Okay, so once I ask them what their preferred contact method is, then I say, well, also kind of a follow-up to that, what level of communication do you want, right? Do you want to be copied on every email I send, or do you want me to only contact you or send you an email when a decision needs to be made? Again, husbands and wives, very different, right? And if you have an engineer, you don't ask them, you just copy them on everything. Okay, so the third question is their decision making, right? So is the husband going to make all the decisions? Is the wife going to make all the decisions? Sometimes they'll tell me, well, the husband, I heard this morning, the husband, he's going to make all the cost-related decisions. And the wife, she's going to make all the design-related decisions, right? Well, that's a recipe for disaster, right? You got to nip that in the bud, and you got to explain that there really is no design decisions that don't have a cost impact. So again, it's really important to keep the husbands and the wives on the same page. I had a good example of this. A few years back, I worked on a big estate home. And big, I guess, I don't know. It's kind of a typical home in Southern California. That's what it looked like. So no, not really. So that is the house, but that's not a typical home in Southern California. So this house is 27,000 square feet, has 17 bathrooms, 12 bedrooms. They did have 6 kids. So anyway, but the story about this, there's a funny story how it ended up like this. So the husband hired the general contractor, and the wife hired the interior designer. So I could just stop here, right, and you kind of know the conclusion, but there's a little more to it. So the husband, he was kind of a creative guy. So he decides that he's going to build value. So he gets this special bonus program set up with his builder where he says, look, I'm going to have you build this house, Brian, and then at the end, I'm going to have it appraised. And I'm going to give you 1/3 of the difference between what it appraises for and what it cost you to build it. So now this builder is like super incentivized to save money, right? Because like every $30,000 that he can cut from the budget is $10,000 in his pocket, as long as he can do it in such a way where it doesn't impact the appraised value of the house. So an interesting approach. So the wife, on the other hand, right, I told you, she hired the interior designer. So I knew the wife had really expensive tastes, and I start seeing what this interior designer is drawing, and she's just drawing stuff that's like off the top. It's crazy, just super detailed, ornate, hand-carved stuff. So I could see the train wreck coming, because I could see that the wife was not interested in building value. She was interested in building Versailles. So I sat down with the husband. I said, look, you're going to have to make a decision here, right? Either you're going to side with your wife, and you're going to have to renegotiate your contract with Brian, or you're going to disappoint your wife and you got to fire this interior designer. So the husband, like all good husbands, what did he do? He sided with his wife. So this is her bathroom that she ended up with. His bathroom was a little smaller and a little more value-oriented. So in the end, this house ended up at about $1,000 a square foot. But you know what? The couple was happy, they had an incredible house, and they're still happily married today. Okay, so here's a couple more tips that I use with couples to make sure that we avoid this most expensive part of construction. So the first thing that I'll do is when I'm asking for a decision, if they're texters, I'll do a group text. Now, I know some of you avoid the dreaded group text, right? You don't want to get involved in those. But what I find with couples is that if you group text them together, then when you get an answer or a reply or a question from one of the spouses, the other spouse will be able to see that as well. Now, if they don't text, if they're email, then what I do is I always CC the other spouse on the email. And I just make it a matter of a policy. So, Jim may email me and say, hey, Ed, we're getting rid of those expensive waterfall countertops. They don't fit in our budget. So I'll reply to Jim and I'll copy Jane. And sometimes Jim will come to me and he'll say, hey, Ed, you know what? That wasn't cool. You shouldn't have done that. That was my decision. And I say, you know what, Jim? I'm sorry. That's just my procedure, right? I'm here to make sure you and your wife stay on the same page. And besides, remember, We're trying to avoid that most expensive cost of construction. Okay, so let me move on from the most expensive part of construction to the most important part of construction. So I often ask my contractor coaching clients, what's the first and most important thing that you build in a successful residential construction project? So it's not the foundation, it's not the framing, it's trust, right? Not trust, trust. So it's kind of like a foundation, right? Because everything that you build after that point is based on the level of trust that you've built with your homeowners. You know, so many, I don't know if it's because I knew I was giving this presentation, but so many people I've talked to and presentations that I've gone to in the last couple of days, I keep hearing this word trust. And I think it's so important. Now, it's important in any relationship, right? But it's especially true and important with the construction industry, right? And why is that? Well, you know what, whether we want to admit it or not, most homeowners don't trust contractors. And they don't trust contractors because they have this inherent mistrust of the construction industry, right? They think that we're dishonest. And why do they think that? Well, because of what they see on TV, right? It's just that stereotype. They've seen those rip-off contractors on TV. I don't know if any of you have seen them. This is my favorite. Any of you seen this? Catch a Contractor. It was on Spike TV. It aired for 3 seasons, was a big hit. So this is the casting call that Catch a Contractor used to attract homeowners to their show. This is what they said. Got screwed, stuck with a messed up home because your contractor did shoddy work or walked off mid-job? Adam Carolla wants to make it right. He'll get you retribution and make that SOB, fix the mess, free of charge, right? So you could just imagine the tone of this TV show, right? You would watch one episode, you'd never want to hire a contractor ever again. Now, I know, you all know that the rip-off contractor is far and few between, right? But the general public doesn't. And it's this stereotype that just runs throughout our society. I don't know if any of you have seen this commercial.
So how much longer do you think this will take?
I'll over-explain the process, then give you an unrealistic timeline.
I'll nod in agreement so my wife thinks I understand what you're saying.
I look forward to questioning your every move.
Okay, well, I'll leave your house in shambles and disappear for 6 months.
Right, yeah. You know, every contractor, they always leave your house in shambles and disappear for 6 months, right? That's very common. So unfortunately, Citibank had enough material, they decided they'd do a second commercial.
Okay. Well, this here's a load-bearing wall. We'll go ahead and rip that out. It's going to cause a lot of problems. Totally unnecessary. And it triples the budget.
We'll be way behind schedule, right?
Schedules.
Schedules. Great.
Okay.
Right. We all rip out load-bearing walls just to triple the budget, right? We do whatever we need to make a buck. So, but the issue is, what you've got to realize is that when you go into a new client presentation, this is what you're going up against, right? So now you can join the Better Business Bureau, you put a nice ethics statement in your marketing materials, and that's important, but you've got to do more than that, right? You've got to find ways to build trust with your homeowners. So I find that there's 2 really important things that we need to do in order to build trust. So the first one is communication, right? We've talked a lot about it here in this presentation. It's so important to communicate with your clients. And again, remember what I said, it has to start from the very beginning. When you explain the process to them, right? When you have enough courage to actually tell them what's really going to go on in the project. And you might lose a client or 2 over that, you know? But at some point, you'll find out that you're going to not only be able to select your clients better, but they're going to trust you, you know? I heard a story at lunch today, right? Where a guy brought his car in, and the check light was on, and the mechanic admitted that it was just something that was wrong, and he took the light off. And he said, look, you know, he could have charged me $500 and replaced it. I wouldn't have known. He said, I don't go to any other mechanic ever again because I trust them because of that. So communication, that's really, really important. So the second thing is documentation, right? The more that your client knows about a project, the more that they're going to trust you. Now, one of the most effective ways that I find in order to build communication and documentation is with a cloud-based construction management system. So I don't know if any of you are using them here. That's for me, when I take on a new contractor coaching client, the first recommendation that I give to them is to implement a cloud-based construction management system. It's that powerful, I think. Especially from the point of trust. You know, it's a cloud-based system can provide what I call signposts of trust throughout the entire construction project, right? With the documentation that you're giving them and the communication, and it just will give you this level of trust that you can't normally get through other processes. Okay, so I want to quickly go through some of the advantages of a cloud-based system. So the first is I think it's a great marketing tool. And it's also a powerful way to distinguish yourself from your competition. Now, this isn't going to last, though, I think, for very long, because I think very soon most every contractor is going to have a cloud-based system. So, you know, it's kind of like if you went in today to your client and you said, I have this thing called an iPhone, right? And it's going to allow me to manage your project so much better because I can send and receive emails from the job site. And I can communicate with this thing called text messages, right? They'd laugh at you. But you know what? 13 years ago, I showed up at a new client presentation with a Trio. Any of you remember a Trio? It was like a glorified Palm Pilot. It was a pre-iPhone. And it was a game changer. And I think that's where we are today with cloud-based systems, right? That's where you can be different than that. So I've talked to a bunch of the cloud-based guys here, and we estimate probably less than 10% of contractors are using a cloud-based system, right? So imagine how you can differentiate yourself from your competition by doing that. But I really don't think it's going to be long. I think in, I don't know how many years it's going to take, but just like most every contractor has a smartphone today, most every residential contractor is going to have a cloud-based system. Okay, so the next advantage of a cloud-based system is it's a great way to communicate. As I said before, communication is so important, and there's so many great ways that you can communicate, whether it's with your clients, you can do like daily construction log updates, you can do comments on finish selections. It's just a really great way to communicate. You can communicate with your subs and getting bids. So the third advantage of a cloud-based system is coordination and collaboration. It just boosts that because everyone's able to see the same information in real time on the cloud, and everyone's sharing the comments, so it just boosts the collaboration of your construction team as a result of that. Third is it's a great way to improve efficiency and control in your companies, right? There's things like bidding and budgets and change orders and construction schedules. I mean, it's all tied in there, so it's a great way to utilize that. And then the fifth is that everything's stored in the cloud, right? So the advantage of that, of having all the documents in one place, there's three advantages. The first is for your client, it's a great closeout package, right? When you finish a job, you tell your client, look, everything, when we finish your job, everything related to your project will be accessible to you on the cloud. Or you can copy it on a thumb drive if they don't trust the cloud. But the point is, everything's in one place. Now, the second thing is that's also a great strategy for you from a risk management standpoint, right? So I heard from a builder last month, and he had to sue his client because they wouldn't pay him the last 10% of a job. It was a $3 million job. So his attorney said, send me all the documentation and we're going to sue this guy. So because he was on a cloud-based system, he was able to send his attorney 1,100 pages of documents, contracts, photos, communications, everything. And guess what? He won the lawsuit. So what I think we need to do is I think we need to start a new television show. And we're going to, instead of calling it Catch a Contractor, we're going to call it Catch a Homeowner, right? And that's going to be episode number 1, right? Because the fact of the matter is that in my experience, I've had more trouble with dishonest homeowners than I have dishonest contractors, right? That's really true. But unfortunately, that's not the way society thinks. So there's lots of great cloud-based systems out there. There's Buildertrend, Co-Construct, UDA Construction Online, and a bunch of others. I know those three all have booths here at the Builder Show. So I would encourage you, if you don't have a cloud-based system, go to their booths, Get a demo, find out what can go on there, and it's a really, really powerful system. Okay, so let me go back to the subject of my presentation, which is eliminating drama and reducing conflict. Now, a cloud-based system is great. It does help us to improve communication and to build trust, but there's certain things that we have to do as individuals, and it can't be done through a computer system. So I have found 4 effective ways to be able to eliminate drama with homeowners and reduce conflict. And I'm going to go over those with you now. They're based on a book called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I don't know, maybe some of you have heard of this book before. It was a New York Times bestseller. So this is, it's a very simple book. You can read it in a night. It's just, I don't know, 100 and some pages, but it'll take you a lifetime to practice it. Really, the 4 agreements, they're simple, but they're not easy. So let me go over them with you here. So the first step is be impeccable with your word. Say what you do and do what you say. So this is the most important of the 4 agreements, but it's also the most difficult. But given that inherent mistrust of contractors that we talked about earlier, this step is critical, right? So some of you may have heard the adage, you know, the problem with the person that lies 10% of the time is that you never know when that 10% is. Okay, so the second agreement is don't take anything personal, right? This is a big one for builders. We get blamed for a lot of stuff, right? And oftentimes we take it personal. So let me get a little Zen with you here now, all right? Nothing other people do is because of us. It's because of themselves. So let me say that a different way. Nothing homeowners do is because of us. It's because of themselves. See, once you understand the homeowner's perspective, it's much easier for you to not take things personal. So hopefully the next time your client screams at you about the tile, you'll have a better understanding that it's not about you. So another thing about not taking things personal is it is a great way to reduce conflict in your construction projects. See, when you take things personal, you feel offended, right? And so your reaction is to defend your beliefs, and that creates conflict. So, do you want to reduce conflict in your construction business? Try not to take things personal. Now, I know this can be difficult, right? But just being aware of this concept can help you to start to practice it. The third agreement is don't make assumptions. Right? Now, this is a big one for contractors as well. One of the most important ways to illustrate the problems with making assumptions is how a contractor deals with change orders. So here's 3 examples. I assumed you knew this fancier fixture would be more expensive. I assumed that when you added these items, you knew that would increase the price. I assumed that when you signed this change order, you knew it would take longer to complete the project. Right? How many times have those assumptions gotten us into trouble? So clear communication is part of not making assumptions. Make sure your communication is clear. Have the courage to ask questions if you don't understand something that someone says. So not making assumptions, that's actually tied into the first agreement as well, because when you don't make assumptions, it's much easier to be impeccable with your word. Okay, the 4th agreement is always do your best. Now notice that it says your best, and it's important to know that your best is never the same. It changes from moment to moment and day to day. So you can be forgiving when mistakes happen in construction, right? When you or your crew make mistakes in construction. Because you know what? Mistakes happen in construction, even when you're doing your best, right? Remember what I said about the prototype? Ford makes lots of mistakes when they're building prototypes, right? And as long as you've explained that to your homeowners and they understand that you're doing your best. So now by doing your best, that also means that you're aware of and you're learning from your mistakes, right? So by doing your best, you give yourself permission to make mistakes and then the integrity to recognize them and improve as a result. Okay, so these are the 4 agreements. As I said, they're simple, but they're not easy. But these 4 principles are really powerful ways to eliminate homeowner drama and reduce conflict in your business. Now, drama disappears with understanding the other person's perspective and compassion. And compassion is created by understanding the other person's perspective. And conflict disappears through clear communication and not making assumptions or taking things personal. So, building understanding, compassion, and communication are 3 of the key lessons that I've learned from my Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh. And I try to practice them every day in my construction business. Now, I was on a panel yesterday with John Crabb. Some of you may have seen that. And John Crabb from Crabb Homes in Tennessee. And he talks about a comment. He says, sometimes I'll hear this where they say, I love my home. It turned out great. He says this in his southern drawl. He says, but you know what? They hate the builder. And unfortunately, we've probably heard that before, right? That's something that we hear oftentimes. And the reason that we hear that is because of the process. And see, the 4 agreements, they focus on that process. And that's the importance of construction. So again, what I find out is that a quality construction project, and many of you have probably figured this out, a quality construction project does not always guarantee a happy homeowner, right? Some of you probably have had those projects before, where you finished the job, it looked great, turned out great, you thought it looked great, and it turned out great, but your homeowner wasn't happy, right? So why does that happen? Well, it's because a homeowner often judges the success of a project by focusing on the construction process rather than the final product, right? So if you go back and you look at those jobs that you had trouble with, I bet you'll find out that most of the problem that caused your unhappy homeowner was the process. It wasn't the product. Okay, so let me finish here today. I'm going to finish by telling you a little story about a kitchen remodel I did a few years ago. So this is the kitchen. It was about a $50,000 kitchen remodel that I did. So for me, this is a picture from House. It's one of my most successful projects. In House, it's been tagged like 20,000 times by people. What happened was it was written up in 2 or 3 House articles, and it went viral. So for me, it's one of my most successful projects. But for the builder, his name was Brad, that wasn't the case. You see, Brad had a falling out with the homeowner, and he never spoke with him after the project was done. So for Brad, it's not a successful project because he couldn't get a single lead out of this project. So why did this happen? Well, it's not anything to do with the quality of construction, right? You can tell it's a gorgeous looking kitchen. It's just that Brad never developed a good rapport with his homeowner. And you see the dog in the picture? Well, that's part of the problem. So about halfway through the job, this dog, his name's Bentley, got scared, and every time Brad and his crew would show up, Bentley would go and run under my client, the homeowner's bed. And this just freaked out the homeowner because he didn't know what Brad had done to Bentley. I mean, had he kicked him? He didn't really know. And see, the thing is, Brad never talked to the homeowner about it. He was just focused on his job, which was making that kitchen look great, right? So in the end, it's ironic, but this adorable little beagle ended up impacting the success of this project more than the quality construction of the project. All right, you see, it's not always about the finish line, right? It's about the steps that we take to get there. But sometimes we're so focused on that finished product, right? So focused on bringing it in on budget and on time that we forget about the steps that it takes to get us there. See, Brad could have addressed this with just a simple conversation with the homeowner, right? Or maybe like giving a doggy biscuit to Bentley. Or maybe a couple of spoons of that calm down medicine for cats, right? I think it'd work for dogs. So, but Brad just never did that, right? A few simple steps, he could have communicated, he could have built some trust, would have completely changed the outcome of this project for Brad. So I'm sure we've all had our Bentley projects, right? We've all had those situations. So the challenge is to find the Bentley, because the fact of the matter is that there's probably a Bentley on just about every one of your projects. So the challenge is to find the Bentley. Now, it's not going to be a beagle, right? It could be the spouse, could be the neighbor, could be a brother-in-law who's giving bad advice, or even just an issue or an idea that came up as a result of the project. So our challenge is to identify that Bentley and then find a way to address it. You know, imagine how much more enjoyable your construction business can be and how much more sleep you'll get when you start focusing on building happy homeowners as well as quality construction projects. So I hope that when you get back and you look at your projects, you'll start looking at them in a new way. Find the Bentley in each of your projects and then use the techniques that I've discussed with you today in order to address them. Okay, so a couple minutes left. I just want to go over a couple of quick things before I tell you what happened to Bentley. So I've uploaded all of my presentation slides at the website. You can also pull it up on your phone, so you can have all of the information that I gave you, so that I really hope that you take this home and you start to practice it. So this is my contact information for those of you that want it. If you want any more information about any of the information that I gave you today, please feel free to contact me. Or if you go back and you're trying to implement a certain project or you're struggling with something, feel free to give me a call. Also, you can watch many of the episodes from my various presentations that I've given on my website, which is thezenbuilder.com. And lastly, this is my first time here in the Spotlight series at IBS. So on your way out, I'd appreciate it if you could just fill out a questionnaire. Hopefully, I'd love to come back again next year if you enjoyed what you heard today. Okay, so as it turns out, we figured out after the project was done that Bentley was scared of the high-pitched noise from Brad's shop vac that he bought about halfway through the project. See, we went back and we looked and we realized that the point when Bentley started running and going under the client's bed was right about the time that Brad bought that shop vac. The problem was that by that point, it was too late for Brad to take any action, right? So when all of you leave here today, I hope that you won't make that mistake, that you will take some actions, all right? Here's a few suggestions of what you can do. First, implement a cloud-based construction management system, all right? Utilize the tips that I discussed about identifying and dealing with difficult clients. Or read one of the books that I talked about here today. Start practicing their 4 agreements. You know, my contractor coaching clients tell me that when they focus on one agreement every week of the month, they start to see how it changes their attitudes and how their business starts to change. And if you're struggling with something or you need encouragement, give me a call. I'd be happy to give you advice or encouragement. So I think you'll be surprised at how much this can change your life, right? At the very least, it'll get your problem solving out of your bed and back into the shower where it's hopefully more enjoyable, right? So thank you all very much. I hope you all have many more happy homeowners in your future. Thank you.